Take it away.
The Common Core, the downfall of our education. I'm Hogan Harris.
I'm Kelly Johnson.
I'm Kyle Hissom. Michael Kelly.
Will Heichi.
A little bit of an introduction. The Common Core today is hindering the growth of knowledge in our schools. Keeps kids from creativity and outside-the-box thinking because they're on such a regimented schedule of what they need to learn and they're learning for the test. The core beliefs are actually sound, and we agree with most of them, but the implementation of these core beliefs are the problem that's going on with the actual core itself. A little bit of background on what the Common Core is. It is a central teaching standard that sets goals for what students need to know. So it sets a bar for all the students to know the same type of information in math and English at each grade level. And they're tested at 4th grade and 8th grade levels, and then throughout high school. 43 states, including the District of Columbia, have adopted these core values to prepare the kids, and it's so that there is a universal knowledge throughout the entire country. And it was created by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State Schools of Officers in collaboration with the teachers around the country in order for the cores to be all consistent with each other. These standards are important because they provide expectations for what students should know and the skills that students should have at the various grade levels in order to prepare them for their life after graduation. So the things like math and English skills that they need to know in order for them to succeed in life. It provides the consistent guidelines for what each student should know. So teachers can pretty much go off of that and teach students what they need to know in math and English, again, at each grade level, so that students are all on a consistent basis. This also provides the benchmarks that the teachers need to have in order for their kids to pass their proficiency tests and their kids to be proficient in their English skills and their math skills so that they are consistent with the rest of the country and hopefully the rest of the world. For a little bit of implementation, the future work, this has a major impact on teachers. Like I was saying, it provides the benchmark that the teachers need to have that all students should be able to participate at. It provides expectations for transfer students, since it is such a spread out belief that the core is a sound standard, that even if a student transfers into another school, they should still have a basic knowledge of exactly where these other students are at the school that they just joined. It actually provides chances for collaboration between teachers throughout the country, because if they're all on the same type of schedule, they should be able to help each other out with different ways of teaching, different ways of learning, things like that. And it actually helps colleges and professionals better prepare teachers for what they need to learn in order for their students to succeed in the workforce or in college life. And then a little bit of the content and quality of these standards. The common requirements for English is that, classical myths, America's founding documents such as the Constitution and Bill of Rights, the foundational American lit, so the authors from America in the past, and a little bit of Shakespeare, which everyone was introduced with Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, one of those plays from Shakespeare at some point during their education. In math, the common standards is that you know whole numbers, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and fractions and decimals, which are taught at a very young level and are expanded upon as you grow through your education.
So after we talked about a little bit of the background, the introduction, I'm going to dive into the reasons why we oppose the Common Core. So we have a quote: "The main purpose of the American school is to provide for the fullest possible development of each learner for family morally, creatively, and productively in a democratic society." So that just shows the goal of education, and that's from ASCE committee, and it's a global group that works on developing standards. So now that we know really what the goal of education is, we believe that the Common Core currently is failing the 21st century student. And as we know, America is not competing globally well as in our education, and we think the Common Core has something to do with that. So various reasons why we oppose the Common Core. It gives the federal government total control. So they set the national standards for what can be accepted, and it gives the bureaucratic system control over teachers and students, and it lets politics affect affect our education. So it's also bad for students, and we'll dive into a little bit why. It's a one-size-fits-all approach. It's saying that this Common Core works for every single student out there, which we know is not true. Every student is different, every person learns differently, and it takes away the ability for the teacher to adapt and personalize the message for every student. Teachers, again, have little control because they have to abide by these guidelines developed by the government, and it hinders the students' creativity in learning because they, again, have to follow a mode and a method that may not be best suited for them. So, if you look, we have a picture that shows the Common Core trying to fit into a puzzle piece that it just won't fit. And again, it can be harmful at the state level as well. And this is because every state has different children living in it, different people residing in it, and they're not going to all be the same, just the way every student's not going to be the same. So if we set a standard that every state has to meet, there's going to be some that rise to the top and some that have to fall down. So everyone's different, and if we set those standards for the states, there's going to be, again, the people that are the states that are performing well, and that's okay. But the ones that aren't achieving up, they're going to lose funding because they're not meeting the standards that the government is making sure that they meet. So the ones that are at the bottom are just going to keep getting cut out. It'll put more pressure on the top performing districts and schools to pick up their slack. And again, it talks about a singular measurement system. So if we have to use the Common Core, we have to have a way to measure every single student and everyone's performance. And the way to do that, the only way to do that for the Common Core is by testing. And we see that the annual testing, all the different testing that is out to graduate high school and whatnot, it puts a lot of pressure on the students. And it's saying that the way you learn is if you can perform well on this one test. And that's just not true. Some students don't test well, and it really creates an epidemic of chasing the grade, which we all know about. It's just everyone is doing everything they can to get a good grade, and then after the test comes and goes, it's a brain dump. And so you already did well on the test, okay, there's no more reason to retain the information. And so we just don't think that one measurement system should be the only way that we evaluate students' performance in the classroom.
Okay, so most of the main reasons of why we oppose the Common Core are because of what it does to teachers and students in the educational system. So teachers have approximately 180 days, whether they have snow days mixed in there or whatnot. So majority of those days, if it's in a test year, they're spent preparing for the test. My sister was in education, so I had to witness her coming up with lesson plans that she did to teach the test. So she was a primary example of how teachers in early childhood, they have to come up with lessons to teach the test, not necessarily their creativity. So the average teaching tenure has dropped from approximately 15 years in 1990, which was before the Common Core was implemented, to now less than 5 in 2013. And that was by David Green. He's had a PhD in higher ed, and he's been in the education world for over 40 years. So he did a little research, and that's what he came up with, and I thought that was astonishing. A big thing that's with teachers is they're saying that their lack of preparedness for the Common Core. They kind of threw this on, kind of how like they threw our integrative core onto our professors, and they don't necessarily know what to do. So they actually found that 22% were very prepared, 27% were somewhat to very unprepared. And so that kind of caught my eye when I was like, well, 27% of teachers, that's a big difference, and that's a lot of students for how many people we have in America. And also, teachers are more so teaching to the test. Their lessons are very strict, direct. They don't have much creativity. So with the Common Core, they have tougher standards and higher accountability rates. And with this education system we have, it's top down. So our government is creating our education. Instead, what it should be, which is bottom up. Like our professors, our teachers, they need to be the ones who are giving the knowledge about what is actually going on. And from the Common Common Core website, 73% of teachers are enthusiastic about implementing the Common Core. So to me, where's the other 27%? And what are they doing that they're not? Because every teacher should be having the same enthusiasm about doing the Common Core. Even if it's not what they like, they need to have it because they're actually hurting the students that they're teaching by not being enthusiastic about it. So another thing from Green, he had a quote that I really liked, and it said, imagine your brain surgeon having to follow the book while operating on you, or he loses his job. So to me, this is, if my brain surgeon comes across with a problem that he sees in my brain, but it's not technically what came from the book, could he not do it? So that's the same thing with professors and teachers. If it's not in the rule book, they can't go out of their way and do it, and that's what the Common Core is kind of hindering them from doing. So I found this picture from Alfie Cohn. It's the professor on top, and he's basically on a tanker, and it's with a student, and he's forcing them to kind of learn. And that's what we feel the Common Core is doing to our education system, and it's really not fair to the students. So how it affects the students, their motivation to learn has decreased a lot because someone may be a good reader, but they may not be a good analytic reader. So if they don't understand, and I feel like teachers nowadays come up with metaphors and similes in books that even the authors of the books originally didn't know that they meant to put in there. So it's creating students to kind of think in one direction, and a lot of students are losing creativity. They learn the same things over and over every year but get more advanced, which isn't a bad thing. Like our math skills, we need that. Our reading, we need to know how to read. So it's good to have these standards, but there's just a difference on how they're approaching actually doing this, and we feel like the Common Core kind of hinders that as well. It's also turning schools into test prep centers. So basically teachers are teaching to the test, and they're also, and students nowadays, we know what tests matter and which don't. Like the OGTs, you have to pass that to graduate, but your 4th and 5th grade, as long as you get proficient or whatever, you can still pass. So, and that's a problem because now students will try less, and then that affects state funding, schools get shut down, a whole bunch of problems come up from that. And one of the other quotes we found from Albert Einstein, it shows a bunch of different animals, and it says, for a fair selection, everyone has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And so our education says everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking that it's stupid. So that kind of really reiterates how we feel that our education system is kind of making us feel stupid, and they're really hindering our ability to express our knowledge in ways that we kind of can't with the Common Core. So the problems from the Common Core, and this is from Maria Santos. She is a media analyst for the Free Bacon. And she says it dramatically reduces the amount of classic American literature and poetry students will read in favor of nonfiction or so-called informational texts. So there's a bunch of books on the banned book list now that students love to read, but now we have to focus on learning the Constitution, learning the Declaration of Independence, which is important, but it also we're losing a lot of the classic American literature, and so students aren't necessarily getting the full, well-rounded education. And because of all these tests that they have to take, more and more schools are closing because they can't reach these rates, and so their funding gets cut, and then teachers get cut, and then they can't afford to keep the school running. And they're spending millions on this testing. I know in California alone, they spent over $700 million last year in testing. I was like, well, that would be a lot nicer if you could maybe build another school or do something else with that money. And it's lowering the quality of education because it's telling students that they have to learn this way, and they're losing a lot of creativity. And like that picture said, if you fail a test, you can live your whole life thinking that you're stupid, and you just may not be a good test taker. And it's also not individualized like education should be. Like Will said, it's a one-size-fits-all approach with the Common Core, and that's not how our education system should be.
Okay, so some of the testing in education, we've talked a lot about the testing and the standardized tests. In Ohio, in elementary school, you have to take the Iowa test, which I remember taking. Middle school, you take the OATs, known as the Ohio Achievement Test. In high school, you take the OGT, the ACT, and the SAT, and those are more so to get out of high school and get into a college maybe you want to get into. All of those exams are standardized. They are made by someone else other than the people teaching the class. And that's sort of where you run into a problem. And education and passing, high school or even elementary school, is basically all on passing these exams. Now the teachers, they do have evaluations. They can have exams, quizzes, tests, but that's working for a grade. There's a little less pressure on that because a teacher can work with you one-on-one and say, hey, maybe we can do this for you, maybe we can do that. Well, if you don't pass these, you don't pass at all. You just don't. And in particular, the standardized exams, like I said, the teachers don't create these. Is there an easier way to evaluate performance? There could be. Maybe you do an oral exam, maybe you do some other kind of exam, but the standardized exams, I don't know if that's the right answer. So, is education currently unconstitutional? Yes, that might be a little bit of an extreme, but some people are starting to say that this is the case. And they're saying that because the government is sort of in charge of the standardized exams, the curriculum, the Common Core. And do you think the government should have this power? Do they have a high enough knowledge in education? Is education a specialty of theirs where they can make these exams and say, hey, this is what we need to do to pass? A lot of people say no. So should they have the ultimate say, the ultimate power if a kid passes a class instead of the teacher or the people that brought them up? I don't know. Probably not. So that's sort of what's going on with the education and the Common Core. Another thing is teachers don't have enough freedom in the classroom. And by this, we sort of touched on it earlier, what I mean by this is, can they teach what they want or what they feel they should teach? Now, I understand that there's some, it's going to tie in. What's on the standardized test a lot is what you're going to teach in the classroom. I understand that ties in, but there definitely are some exceptions. And do they have enough freedom? And I know when I was in high school, there's a particular teacher, really intelligent, really good math teacher, teaches calculus, and he said, if you talk to him today and you ask him, what do you teach? He'll just say, oh, I just teach what I'm told. And whereas 30 years ago, he taught what he wanted to teach, what he thought was most effective. Now he says he's just doing what he's told. And he's a great teacher, a great guy, he's involved in other things. He has kids in the school, or did have kids in the school. And he's a guy firsthand that would tell you, look, it's probably not right how standardized, how much curriculum there is involved with this. And lastly, so basically in calculus, we'll go point A to point B to point B, to point C, D, all the way to C. You do all these points, and then by that time you have to move on to something else. And it's like you have to fit all of this stuff in. Even if the kids don't get it, you got to move on because you got to fit everything in this class period, everything in this week, this month, before they take this exam. And sometimes that can cram it for teachers and make it hard on teachers to teach effectively. How effective are exams? Are we trying to learn in class, or are we just trying to get a higher grade? It's something we talk about a lot. You can relate it to school, you can relate it to a sport. Will plays football, I play golf, Hogan plays lacrosse, Kelly plays volleyball. Are we going to practice just because we have to be at practice, or are we going there to get better? Say you play the piano. Are you going to your piano lesson just because you have to be there because someone's making you go there, or are you going to actually try to get better? And a lot of times I think kids are sitting in the classroom like, I'm just here to write these notes down so I can study them for an exam. You know, a lot of times you can write notes down, you're doing a lot of other things, you just copy the notes down but you don't retain it. So that's part of it, our kids really learning. I mentioned it earlier, are exams the best way to evaluate performance? Maybe, maybe not. I say you can have oral exams. There are a lot of kids, a lot of people, I'm one of them, and we all know them, or we might be one ourselves, that struggle with exams, but they can perform well in the classroom. They're intelligent kids, but it's difficult for them to sit down and study and retain information. Not everyone has a photographic memory. I mean, I know just through some of my family members, my brother basically does, and I don't. It's difficult for me. So there are kids that struggle on exams. There's good, smart kids that you know work hard and are educated, but they don't do well on exams.
Okay, so how does the United States compare to the competition? Currently, East Asian nations by far outperform Western nations. Currently, the United States is ranked number 14 out of the top 20 countries. It's actually pretty interesting because the last time it was ranked was in 2012, and we are currently up 3 places from that. We were placed 17th in 2012. South Korea is ranked number 1, and it's interesting about their education because in South Korea you actually go to school pretty much 7 days a week. In South Korea, education is prized, and parents, teachers, and even students care about the results. That came from the NBC Times. NBC Times also studied each one of the 20 nations and came up with 8 traits of educational success. And they found that when you start at age 7 or roughly there, that's the best time. Also, no homework for children who are young. No exams should start until you're age 13. All classes are mixed ability, and all classes are also small sizes, roughly 16. There should be lots of break in between classes. Here in the United States, recess has pretty much disappeared from our education. And then teachers train to the master's level, and then their training should be paid for by the government. So government and the Common Core. No one person can be identified as the creator of the Common Core. However, in 2009, state leaders that consisted of governors, commissioners of education from 48 states, 2 territories, and the District of Columbia all got together to start discussing preliminary forming the Common Core. The Common Core, however, is not nationally recognized as the set curriculum. There are currently 43 states that have adopted it and 7 that have not. This is just a map of all the states that have adopted it and who have not. So, should the government back away from our education? The government actually has been in our education for roughly 225 years. They started their help in it with the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Both of these bills were passed by legislation to create and maintain public schools in the current growth of the United States. So we all have local property taxes, state income, and sales taxes, which are all fun things that we like to pay for, right? Currently, property taxes pay for 48% of our education. State income and sales tax pays for 44% of our education. 8% of it is also funded through grants. The government also helps finance construction of new schools as well. If the government were to back out of our education how it currently is, not including the Common Core, taxes would increase and schools would suffer. Most students, at least myself, pay for college with the use of FAFSA. If the government were to get out of our education, FAFSA would disappear, meaning less students in college. It also formulates a little bit of equality into our education as well. So now we ask the question, who should lead our education? We all have, I guess, our own opinions about it. The Common Core, to me, is not the best thing, but I do agree that the government should be at least influencing it as well. I think it should be more 51% schools and teachers, 49% government, so that the teachers and the school system should have final say.
I mean, I think it's very important that we have national standards. So by certain age levels, you can read a certain level what you should be leading, but I feel like the government shouldn't necessarily be mandating that as strictly as they are, because the teachers, they know their students better than the government does. To us, we're a social security number to the government. Whereas to you, we're Kelly, Hogan, Kyle, Mike, and Will. Like, we're actually individuals. So it makes a huge difference when the professor can pass you. They know you better than anyone. So it's like, we take these tests that they mandate, and yes, there should be some standards. The Common Core doesn't completely fail our nation. We are still ranked up there. We have some astonishing educators in our corner, kind of, but it's just the way that it was implemented and kind of the lack of knowledge behind it is what kind of grinds our gears and why we're kind of opposed to it.
Not only that, like the standard